But you see,
Yes.
I don't like the change.
I'd like to call the work session to order. And will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Leahy.
Present.
Councilmember Kerr. Present. Councilmember Martin.
Present.
Councilmember Ford. Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Councilmember Distaff. Mayor Riley. Mayor Riley.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Thank you. Now we have an opportunity for public comment to speak on anything on this agenda that we're going to be addressing today. Would anyone like to speak? See no one in the audience. Is there anyone online? No one online? In that case, we'll close the public comment period. At this point, turn to the town manager and please present the audit.
I will immediately turn this over to our financial director.
Good evening, all, and I am going to turn it over to Matt Miller, who is with McMahon and Associates, who did our 2024 financial audit. And he is online. And Matt, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Are you able to hear me?
Oh, beautiful. Yes. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you, Matt.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Miller, and I'm one of the partners with McMahon and Associates. So our firm, obviously we're new to you, but that's because you are new to everyone. And so we are a unique CPA firm. We're based out of Avon, so not too far away. And we specialize in financial statement audits. So we don't do bookkeeping. We don't do personal tax work or anything like that. We do financial statement audits all year round. And that primarily consists of local governments. So we audit hundreds of local governments around the state. And in order to do that, we break the audit process down into 3 parts. So the first one is planning, the second one is fieldwork, and then the final one is reporting. Reporting is ultimately what we're here to do today. At the end of the audit, we issue 2 reports. One of them is the opinion on the financial statements themselves. And then the second one is called the governing board letter, which is more or less a report card to you as council members as far as how the actual audit went. So if we back up and do an overview of kind of what we actually do, and then I can take you through your report. So that first part is called planning. So this year, there's actually quite a bit of extra stuff that we need to get from you because it's first year. But we send your team what's called an engagement organizer. So that's both an electronic request list, but also a secure file transfer portal. And then we scheduled the audit. So there was a specific week for the audit, and everything gets uploaded before that. So during the audit week, there was 4 team members. So there's a partner, and then you had a manager. That's Lillian. She actually lives in Silverthorne, so just down the street. There's an in charge. So that's another CPA. That's Mike. And then there was a staff member who assisted them. That was Tracy. And so when they start for planning, we download basically your entire database of transactions and we import it into our accounting software. And over the last few years, accounting has really switched from more or less a random sampling to a process called data analytics. And so data analytics is really where we kind of first begin. And so once we import your entire database of transactions, we run a bunch of different tests on it. So with the data analytics, we summarize all your vendors to see who you paid the most money to, how often you paid them. We're looking for things like if I see a vendor with 11 payments, maybe we're missing one. It could be a monthly charge. If you see one with 13 payments, maybe too many. We would extract transactions with high-risk vendors. Just as an example for you guys, one of the ones we noted this time was a Patagonia purchase, which was for town business, but obviously that's not a kind of a traditional government vendor. And then we do run various statistical analysis on your numbers. One of those being Benford's law. So basically transactions across a normal business happen in a specific kind of manner. And so if you have outliers from that, we like to look at that to see maybe what's different. And then once we kind of go through that first process, we make the next step, which is we read your meeting minutes. We would compare budget to actual. So what did you plan on happening versus what actually happened? And that really guides what we do in fieldwork. And then I think fieldwork is what everyone thinks of as actual audit process. So during that part, we go through all your bank accounts. We actually independently confirm with the bank what you said was there was actually there. We want to make sure your receivables and your revenues are recorded in the correct year and that you're actually getting paid what you owe. Capital assets is a big one. Obviously, you had kind of the takeover of about 20 something million dollars worth of assets this year. So that was a big area of focus. And then we do spend time with your payroll and your accounts payable. So your payroll is outsourced, but we do pull documents from them. So basically they get an audit that says we're processing payroll correctly. And then we go through that. And then as far as your payables go, we obviously want to be able to see the whole process. So can I see who's approving it? Can I see where it's being coded? Is it actually recorded there? And does it seem like a reasonable expense? And then the final part of field work is internal controls. So we document and we go through every major process. So your accounts payable process, your payroll process. And then we perform specific testing on that just to make sure that what you told us was happening and what you think is happening was actually happening. And then the final part is reporting. So if there's any questions on kind of what we do, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I can take you through your report.
Any questions? Proceed.
All right. So the first report that we issue is on the actual audited financial statements themselves. And so the audit report is broken down into sections A through F. Section A is the actual opinion from us. You received what's called an unmodified audit opinion. That's a clean opinion, exactly what you're looking for. And there's nothing really to highlight, so no emphasis of matter or anything this year. The second part of your financials is what's called management's discussion and analysis. It's a little different this year because generally it's a 2-year comparison, but that is a high level kind of consolidated overview of the town. And then moving past that in section C is where the actual audited financial statements themselves begin. So like any governmental entity, you present 2 types of financial statements. So the first 2 pages, C1 and C2, are what's called the government wide. That is, again, a consolidated long-term basis. You'll see things like your capital assets there, but that's not probably what you're most familiar with because that's not how you budget. So if we move past those to page C3, that's where the actual fund level financial statements begin. And that is what I think people are most familiar with. That's how you budget. That's how you're approving payments. That's how your transactions flow for the year. Obviously you started the year from 0. So you did have almost a $2 million net income this year in your general fund, and in total, a little over 2.6 million. I know, first few years, hard to kind of figure out where everything is flowing, but ultimately that puts you with a beginning net position in your general fund that's pretty strong, I would say. Obviously time will tell, but that's one indicator we usually look at is what is your fund balance compared to annual operating expenditures. Moving past that to section D, those are the footnotes to the financial statements. And so the footnotes really do 2 things. They detail your significant accounting policies. And then the second part is to give you information on what's in your numbers and what's behind the numbers. So things you'll find in there is what kind of cash and investments you have, what kind of capital assets, how are they being depreciated, and then any kind of significant agreements. And then the final 2 sections is section E. That's a presentation of your budget to actual. So again, what did you think was going to happen versus what actually happened? And then the final part is F. That is basically your highway, the highway report. So money that you got in and how you spent that. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the actual audit report itself. Otherwise, I do have that short board letter for you.
Any questions? Councilmember Sullivan.
Just a real quick one, this is silly, but we have no allowances for uncollectibles. Is that common?
That's pretty normal for a government, especially when you're primarily talking about something like sales tax that is coming through, another governmental entity. So when, it's basically tax revenue, be that sales tax, property tax, that's all considered pretty collectible. You're ultimately going to get it. I would say
Sure.
that where it's common to have an allowance is if you had an enterprise fund, so something that you're running like a business, whether that's electric, trash, there can be some consideration there.
Carol,
Hi, thanks. Pardon me if I understood this incorrectly, but I think you said that one of the keys you look at is comparing the fund balance to the operating totals. I may have gotten that wrong, but if whatever it is, in what way, what is the rule of thumb that you're looking for if you can do that?
Sure. Generally speaking, when I look at your operating expenditures for the year compared to your fund balance, you're trying to determine how many months on hand do you have. As a sales tax entity, you would run leaner than, say, a property taxing entity. So something like a county would typically have more money. But generally, you're going to see months of operations on hand, probably not years worth of operations. I think a good kind of benchmark would be 6 month minimum. We usually don't see our government clients get below that. This is a little bit of a difficult year because you have to exclude that significant capital outlay amount, which is technically what was contributed to you. But if you backed that out, you can give me a second here. Your fund balance right now on hand is 1.9 million, and your annual operating expenditures were more like 1.2 million. And I know that's going to change over the next few years. You were still kind of getting started under 2024. I know a lot of personnel has been hired since then. But that over, I guess, over the course of several years is where we would really look to see where you're at.
Thank you.
John,
So I want to, oh, of course I just lost it. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the asset portion correctly. It's 23,895,000 and change. Is most of that road activity or like road infrastructure, that kind of stuff?
Yes, it is definitely infrastructure. If you give me a second here, I can tell you exactly what's on there.
And my question with this, my follow-up is, for when I typically view assets, I view them as something that I can go to the market, the general market, and sell that, right? I don't think we're gonna sell roads, right? So how does that get taken into consideration as an asset versus liability, and something that like we probably aren't gonna be able to sell all of our roadways or something like that?
Sure. So that's only on your government wide, and it is primarily roads and streets. You do have a little bit of some IT infrastructure and some other things in there that are more recent. And so when you're capitalizing things as a government, you capitalize things that are used in basically your function as a government, and things that fall under your capitalization policy. So your policy is on page, or at least what you followed for this year. I know I saw it on the agenda for later. On page D4, so basically you capitalize and then it lists, land, infrastructure, building and improvement, park improvement, equipment, things that have an initial useful life of more than 2 years and have a value of more than $5,000. That's very common. The $5,000 threshold for Colorado is specific because Colorado statutes require that you annually inventory that. And so most governments say they annually inventory it when they're going through preparation for their audit to prepare the capital asset listing. You may not be able to sell a lot of that stuff. Obviously, you're not going to sell streets and things like that. For governments, that's a little different. So if you have assets that are held for sale, so something that theoretically could be sold, it does not get capitalized. It is moved. So big picture again, you present two types of financial statements. If you had assets held for sale, say on your general fund, you would have it actually listed as an asset there. capital assets do not show up on the fund because they are considered a long-term thing that the government is going to use. So you actually expense those projects in the year that you're buying it. So on your general fund, let's say you did, built a new road, that would be an expense for the year. And then you reflect that on your government wide. But if you had a building that you were going to actually sell or potentially sell, that would be on your general fund as an asset held for sale. So I guess the difference is where it shows up. Does that
Okay.
answer your question?
Yes, but no. I lost you a little bit. Like, so if we, and we don't, but if we had a fleet of vehicles, or if we had a fleet of vehicles in the future, right? That by definition, over the $5,000 and with that 5 to 7 year use expectation, would fall under the capital aspect and not a general fund, right?
Exactly, because it's something that you're going to use. And while it's in using the operation of the town, and while it still has a residual value, it's an asset that you're using. It's not something that you've acquired purely to sell again.
Okay.
And
Is
for,
there,
sorry, go ahead.
is there a breakdown where, and I know this isn't a technical term, but we could see like our quote, real assets versus like what is capital assets? Is there a breakdown in here that I might not have seen?
When you say real assets,
And again, I know that's not the technical term, right? But we had a fleet of vehicles outside and they're all worth $100,000 and we have 5 of them, right? That's $500,000 in assets. My
Sure.
understanding is that would be compiled and put into the same pool as all of our streets, roads, bridges. Is there a distinction, or is there an area where that's called out separately?
Yep. So in the footnotes on page D10 is where the detailed note for capital assets is. And so if you look at that for this year, obviously infrastructure, which are the roads and the streets, that's the biggest one. But below that, you have furniture, vehicles, and equipment. For this year, that's primarily equipment. It's the IT items, but that shows you where the breakdown is there. It's not necessarily standard practice for governments, but when you're depreciating those, you don't have to depreciate it all the way down to zero. If you feel like there's a residual value there for vehicles and things, you could depreciate it down to basically what you consider a salvage value. But again, that's really not common practice for a government.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
All right. Well, the final thing we have for you is that board letter. It's nice and short, just 2 pages, which is exactly how you want it. That means we did not have a lot of items to report to you. So everything that's in here is what we're required to tell you. So the first part of that letter is called qualitative aspects of accounting policy. And what that really means is what's behind your numbers. So there's 2 main things. The first one are your significant accounting policies. Technically, there was a brand new standard for this year, which relates to compensated absences. So that's paid time off. Given that you didn't have previous years, it was not really a big effect to you, but that is technically in here. And then the second part is that you do have 2 significant estimates within your financial statements. The first one is the useful lives on those capital assets. So that's how you're depreciating them. You follow industry standards, so nothing unusual, but at the end of the day, that's an estimate for how long they're going to last. And then the second one is related to those accrued compensated absences. So things like vacation time have a termination payout, so it's not an estimate. Once it's accrued, you owe it. They're either going to use it or they're going to get paid at termination. But the new standard requires that we estimate how much of other leaves, other types of leave, anything that can accrue basically has to be estimated and recorded in there. So we take a pretty conservative approach, I guess, on recording that, but both of those again don't affect like any kind of budget payout or anything. So pretty limited estimate, I would say. As far as difficulties encountered in performing the audit, we did not have any. And I would just like to highlight that for a first year audit, with your finance director was new. and didn't actually do any of the work that was being audited. So kudos to them. The turnaround on this was really fast. The audit week was at the end of May, and the report was issued, before the deadline. That's pretty quick turnaround. Most of our audits, May would be probably the latest you could possibly go to get it done, and everything has to go really smoothly to get it done. So I want to give them credit there. As far as corrected and uncorrected misstatements, we did not post anything that was a material adjustment. And really that just means that, the information that you had that you budgeted on, that was accurate. As far as disagreements with management, we did not have any. And then the final part here is this report is finalized. So it has been filed with the state. And so in order to do that, I believe it was the town manager signed the management representation letter, which is mostly just says I didn't lie, steal, or cheat, that you were honest with us and that everybody did their best.
Any other question? Any questions?
So was this an A?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, from our standpoint, everything went, really well. First year, you never know, I guess, what you're going to get, but everything, from our standpoint, went really smoothly. And like I said, the turnaround was fast. That means that, everybody could find things when we requested documents. They were able to answer our questions, and that's all we can ask for.
Right. Anything else? So again, thank you very much, and kudos to Heike, who worked with the audit and has put things in place for it. And I think
Good
the
job.
council on a whole really appreciates that.
Who managed before we got Heike, so.
And the host staff, because they kept everything's very organized and easy to find. And yeah, if it wasn't for the staff as a whole and what the process that they put into place, it wouldn't have gone as smoothly. But yeah, it was a lot of work, but the whole team, the audit team, they were really great to work with. So we look forward to doing it again next year.
Any other, aside from the official audit, any other recommendations that you think the managing body, the council, ought to be looking at?
We really didn't have any for this year. I know you're going to implement some new accounting software, I believe, coming up. And that is probably where most of the recommendations will come from. Used external accountants for most of what we covered this year, so 2024. Once you kind of move into doing everything in-house, you'll probably end up with more recommendations from us.
Why?
So, when you use an external accountant, they have, they run hundreds of governments, so they have really solid internal controls in place. So they have segregation of duties as far as things are going. You used Bill.com, which has a wonderful audit trail, and your payroll was outsourced, which also has a nice audit trail. If you bring all of that in-house, you become, it's harder to have segregation of duties because they have 25 accountants. You might have 2. And whether or not you implement the same type of, it's called an ERP system, but basically it's more than just accounting software. It's something that has or what's called an active control. It basically prevents you from doing something. So Bill.com or Paylocity is an example of that. You can't move forward without certain approvals. And so once you bring everything in-house, if you don't have enough people or the right basically processes, you can't necessarily achieve the same type of internal controls.
Any last chances, comments? And thank you very much. I found this very useful for myself, and I'm sure the rest of the council members did as well. So, again, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
This certainly went easier than the KNC annual audit at the meeting a couple months ago.
Yes.
That I think your owner made the presentation. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
And with that, let me turn to the town manager for discussion of capitalization depreciation policy, which follows right off of what we just discussed.
Okay, first I want to assuage some fears. Heidi and I have worked together very well, and we are both very conscious of the necessity of separating decision-making from bookkeeping, from reporting. Cassell has built-in, you can't change things in Cassell, they're there forever. The approval processes are the same way. Heike Wenders is the only one who can enter things into Excel, does not have any ability to approve expenditures in any way. So we've got that, we're not going to be getting an entirely different report. They're going to go, oh, wow, you guys really do know how to do this. So.
Right, well, I mean, the auditor did bring up a valid point, especially since we're so small. Internal controls are, they're extremely, extremely important, but John and I are very passionate about that as well. And I did have lengthy conversations with the auditor lead Lillian about our internal processes once everything does come in-house and everything's agreed upon. But Cassell, just so you guys can sleep at night, they're a government software and their approval processes are amazing, and the transparency that comes with that is exceptional. So there's no worries there. We'll continue to use Paylocity for our payroll, which John has to approve before it goes, before we get paid. And then our intent currently is to use Bill to keep the checks rolling. So that may change, but if it does, there'll be something equally in place. But right now, we're going to continue to use that once Cassell gets online, just because it's already in place and the cost for that is very reasonable. Plus, it has it's got really great approval process also.
Carol?
I see this discussion alone shows that you both have a real commitment and recognition of the importance of accountability. And I think that's probably because of your experience. So I appreciate that. And we'll look for more.
Now I will let Heike talk about capitalization and depreciation policy.
All right, another policy in front of you guys. So it's a proposed capitalization and depreciation policy that follows, it follows GASB, it follows GFOA, CML, CGFOA best practices. So it's put in front of you. And, I know all those lovely acronyms that you just
Those
love.
sound really good.
I know. Trust me, you don't love them quite as much as I do. But once a policy is in place, that just tells the staff how we record and keep track of our capital assets and how we depreciate. So it's an important piece to have in our policy. So I'll just open it up for questions.
Just a quick question. I think a lot of people are familiar with, capitalization and depreciation. What differences are there in government versus what you would typically see in a commercial environment that we should be aware of?
Just mostly just the reporting, like for the annual audit is the big one. GASB has a lot of say in how we record and how it's depreciated and how we record that in the year-end financials.
Okay.
Carol?
So I was glad John asked the question because indeed, to me, the road seemed like a liability. And I think I understood most of what our audit guy said. But see if you can help me understand. How do we understand that the capitalization threshold for roads and bridges is 20 to 50 years? I'm not sure if that seems like too wide a range, too high a cap. Just help me think about that. Can one of you?
Yeah, so my practice when it comes to our, like, especially when it comes to our depreciation policy, some items are just very straightforward and easy to know what that useful life is. Others are a little more difficult, like the ones that you brought up, and, buildings is another one, depending on how old it is. And I usually just reach out to the auditors and see what they recommend. And kind of go from there. And so usually we just kind of have a conversation about what we're trying to depreciate and go from there. Because some of them do have a broad range of how far you should go out, and it's really based on what your useful life, what you anticipate to get out of it.
Building off that, I think we have a very unique perspective where, aside from a few segments of town sidewalks or roads that are being built now or in the very near future, we very well might be at that 20-year mark on some of the roads. So how does that get accounted for in the policy?
Well, so we'll depreciate it when the expenditure actually happens.
For rebuilding a road, say?
Rebuilding a road. Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
So there isn't any automatic annual depreciation?
There is, yes. So once something hits our depreciation schedule, it follows the straight line,
All right.
straight line depreciation based on the useful life of whatever that you're doing.
So when something is rebuilt like we're doing right now with the Ranch Road project, that will start with a new estimated life for that project, and then the cost will be capitalized this year, and then that will be depreciated down over whatever the determined useful life is.
So also when it comes to roads, it depends on what you're doing the roads. So basically to depreciate, the rule of thumb in government is to depreciate a road, it has to be brought down to the surface. So it has to, I don't know, what's the term? Is it, you can't just chip and seal, like chip and seal is not going to be counted as a depreciation. It should be.
That's a maintenance issue, but it's still capital expense.
It's still capital expense, but you don't depreciate.
But in
that.
the case of this road, we're taking it all the way down.
Yeah, if you
and
take,
back up.
exactly, yes.
So that would start, that asset will get a brand new life,
Yes,
and then it would be depreciated down annually from there.
exactly, yes.
Silly question probably, but does each road have its own depreciation cycle? So, like this mile, it's 20 years old, this one's 10, we're depreciating separate. Do we inventory each road separately, or is it all in one big bucket?
It's inventoried separately.
Really?
Mhm.
Which kind of brings us back to the original question we might have had. There's a figure as to the value of our road infrastructure. Where did that figure come from? Was that the survey you had done this year?
No, but next year's figure will incorporate that. That figure was based upon previous reporting by the county and by the CDOT, who administers the highway user tax fund dollars. So those are the roads that are counted in the depreciable inventory.
And let's just say there's a stretch of road that's a mile long that is in deplorable condition, needs to be completely scraped down to the bottom and redone, right, at whatever that cost is. Would the CDOT survey or would the future surveys value that at the full value of what that road is, or would they value that at very minimal because it's at the end of its life?
See, we're in an interesting position because if they were all new roads, we would start from here.
Yeah.
Well, the CDOT survey took the depreciation that went into straight line depreciation, which is a minimal amount to tell the truth on it, depreciation of those assets. Like you said, roads are very funky things to call assets. So they're very funky things to depreciate. They're all very unique and To tell the truth, as a town manager, I think it's important we know our roads, we know the condition of our roads. I don't have the concern an accountant does for the depreciation value of the roads. I think the more important number you as a council will have to look at when considering the roads is when I put together a capital asset and replacement report for you once.
For the roads.
How we can start doing that, because that's the number we'll have to spend, and that will tell you when we'll have to spend it. The depreciation schedule won't necessarily be able to give you that number, because some roads have been taken better care of. If you chip seal a road every 3 years, aside from eventually having to scrape it down, it's going to have a significantly longer lifespan than an identical road that never has any sort of crack maintenance applied to it whatsoever. So to tell the truth, it's much more important to look at what it's going to cost us than to study how that kind of nebulous number on that sits out there on our audit.
Thank you.
When we brought those roads over from the county, I assume the county had also had them valued.
Yeah.
And so did we basically take the value that the county had and rolled them in? So,
We sent that list to our auditors, so I assume.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would make sense. And it would have the projected useful life listed on there, and they rolled that forward.
Yes. Although, you know, they were projected useful lives, not based on anything other than how long they had existed.
Right. And as you pointed out, the more important thing is the capital maintenance report that you just got, last night, that will lay out what the condition of the roads and what the capital maintenance improvements are. That we have to then keep in mind as we're working budgets and funding to ensure that when that road requires work, that we have the general fund or we have the funding to be able to support that project.
Yeah, or even more so, just to ensure that we keep our roads, all of our roads up to a certain standard with as minimal work as possible. Do it early, do it cheap.
Other questions? So I guess we've all had a chance to see the proposed policy. Shall staff go forward and put this in a resolution for approval for the next meeting?
I thought so.
Okay? Great. Next item is discussion of open meetings laws, quasi-judicial matters, use of email. This is something council members had requested. Without turn it over to the town manager, who I assume is immediately going to pass the hot potato.
You are absolutely correct. I will pass it to our town attorney.
Good afternoon, members of town council. Jennifer Madison, the town attorney. And Stephen has the presentation up, so we'll go through this tonight, and feel free to chime in with any questions that you might have. The Colorado Open Meetings Law governs your conduct as a town council, and it requires, as a general matter, that business of the council be conducted in public. What this means specifically is that any gathering of 3 or more public officials of a body convened to discuss public business must be an open meeting. What an open meeting means is that it must be open to the public. It doesn't have to be at a certain place, doesn't have to be in council chambers. It just means that if 3 or more of you are getting together to talk about public business and someone wants to come up and join the conversation, and I shouldn't even use the word join. Someone wants to come up and listen to the conversation, they can do so.
A quick question. Definition of a public official, specifically committee members. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's people who, and I've got a little handout for you that is a quick reference sheet. So last, when we were at the Trails and Open Space group, one of the members of that group asked for a quick reference guide so that he could understand the open meetings law a little bit better. So I'll go ahead and hand this out for you. And then there are other rules related to the open meetings law. So if there is a quorum present, or if you can take formal action, then advance notice is required. And what that advance notice is the 24-hour notice. So you all follow that when you meet here for these meetings, the 24-hour notice is provided. Even when you meet for your councils with coffee and other events like that, the town clerk provides notice of those meetings as well. So this is just some more basics. The 24-hour advance notice is required for those meetings where you have a quorum present or you can take action. There are requirements for minutes and recordings, and those are really for your regular meetings that you need to take minutes. If you start recording meetings, then you need to continue recording meetings. The law does talk about what meetings are. You know, it says talk about what is public business. And that is any matter related to policy, operations, or governance of the public body. This allows you to get together for social gathering. If you're not talking about public business, then these rules don't apply. And the open meetings law specifically says that if you're getting together for a social gathering, that's not included.
Jennifer, just a quick question on this. Did I understand it correctly that an open meeting, so such as coffee with council, right? There's a requirement for recordings, minutes, and notice?
No, because you're not taking action. You're not, yeah, you're just engaging and you're engaging with citizens and you're not taking action. There's no reason to record anything for those meetings.
And so would those would be considered open meetings, right? But why do they not have the same requirements as, say, this open meeting?
Because this is more official in terms of being able to direct staff to conduct business. Those are more informal.
So technically an open meeting, but informal in the nature of the business.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. And I do have another slide regarding electronic communications. So we'll get to that, but also just think about telephone, you know, if you have a three-way call, that is, and you're talking about public business, that is an open meeting. And presumably you can't invite the public to that telephone call. So you shouldn't be doing that, having a three-way call, talking about public business. The serial meetings is a topic that came up, I would say within the last 5 years, and that's related to a Douglas County School Board. There were a lot of political issues happening on the school board. Some of the members of the school board did not like the executive director. And so they engaged in what's called serial meetings. And so that's where two members would meet and talk about what they wanted to do with the executive director. Then this member met with another member and they talked about what they wanted to do with the executive director. And they had separate discussions, but it was like a kind of a telephone game where they were getting together outside of a open meeting discussing what action they wanted to take towards that director. Then they went into their open meeting and right away they terminated that executive director without any discussion, without any back and forth. And that person, it wasn't the director, it was the superintendent of the school district. That person filed a lawsuit against the Douglas County School District and claimed that there was a violation of the open meetings law because business was conducted outside of the open meeting. In other words, the conversation was occurring in a separate space. I don't think we have a court decision on it yet, but it's just a note of caution that that is an issue that is getting traction. You know, some communities have watchdogs for open meetings violation and are really try to make sure that their town council, that their government conducts all of their meeting in the open. I think Basalt is one of the communities where there is a person who really pays attention to that. So just a note of caution.
With that example, do you think that the legal precedent is going to be more set from the like improper termination, right? Like if they had the same conversation that they had with those serial meetings in an open format and whatever the grievances was communicated out, would that have not substituted this violation? Or I'm trying to understand where the arguments are coming from. If they had the same conversations that they had individually in an open setting, would that have not been an issue then?
Right, then there would be no claim of an open meeting violation.
And I'm just using Carol as an example. Carol and I have a conversation outside of the open meeting, and we come and say the same exact thing, right? Like, you know, I think that this executive director failed in this way. And I said the same thing that we had talked about privately in a serial meeting. Would that have been an issue?
No. So if
you talk to Carol and I separately.
right.
But then if we all come and share our same opinions that we talked separately about.
If you are having the discussion and you're forming policy, you're making the decisions in the meeting. And so you are transparent to the public as to why you are deciding to terminate this superintendent, then there isn't an open meetings law violation. It's not to say that you can't have conversations, one-on-one conversations about the work that you're doing here. You can certainly have those conversations. But the idea is, you know, maybe a note of caution is don't necessarily have your mind made up before you come into the meeting, and also express your thoughts in the meeting so that everybody can hear what your opinions are and what your thought process is.
So if they had just expressed their thoughts instead of just terminating right away, then it would have been understood. Okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
But could there still have been a serial meetings allegation if it was found that some individual council member or the mayor or the school board president had talked to Steve over here separately, and I talked to John separately and Carol. And so as a result, we all knew and were ready to make that decision to terminate. And we determined that, yeah, the board was definitely in favor of termination. Would that have constituted a potential violation?
I mean, probably not if you're going to be talking about it, if you have the discussion in the open.
All right.
Even if you've had it separately outside of the actual meeting, if you've had it separately in private, there's really nothing in the law that says you can't meet two of you can't meet to discuss public business.
Even though you're talking about the same public business with all the council members.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah. There are laws in other states that prohibit serial meetings explicitly. Colorado doesn't do that yet. I mean, there would have to be a court decision that says for some reason that it's prohibited, but that would be a stretch because there's no prohibition about two of you talking about public business.
Good.
As I listen to you, I think I'm hearing a distinction between sharing information versus proposing action. Is that too strong a distinction?
It is.
Okay,
It is.
let me give you an example, maybe then we can. So I think it's helpful if any one of us shares information with everybody else. Say one of us went to some outside board or meeting and brought back that information. That's not an open meeting, is it?
Are you talking about,
In an email.
okay. so
An email
we're
to
getting
all,
we're getting into
here's something
emails.
I've
I have
learned.
another slide on emails.
Okay,
This is
I'll hold
just,
that thought.
okay.
Well, or a conversation, right? Like, sorry, Carol goes to a CML board meeting and we bump into each other at steep. Is she not allowed to be like, this is what happened at the CML?
Of
Meeting?
course, yes. Yeah, because two of you can meet and talk about public business.
And Carol's allowed to bump into Valerie the next day and share the same information, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, the goal here is that, the goal is transparency. The goal is that the public is involved in your decisions, in the big decisions. You as town council are making legislative decisions and you're making quasi judicial decisions. So those decisions need to be made in an open meeting. And by coming to a meeting, making a significant legislative decision without any conversation at all about it, with a motion to approve, no conversation, it looks like
Agree.
that conversation happened outside of the meeting. And so the appearance and the process is important for an open meeting. Executive sessions, I think you all are pretty familiar with that. There are specific topics that you can have executive sessions on. It is important. You can call an executive session at any regular meeting or any special meeting. So this is a work session. You can't have an executive session in a work session. So regular meeting or special meeting, you can have executive sessions. Executive sessions don't have to be on your agenda. You can call an executive session on a topic at any time during your regular meeting. And the reason you can do that is that one of the executive session topics is for legal advice. So you all need to be able to get legal advice when you want to get it, and not have to put it on your agenda. You don't have to have forethought that you need legal advice. So that's why you don't need to put it on your agenda.
So does that extend, say there's a legal issue that's blown up and John proposes a executive session? Do we have to wait for a meeting to?
You have to call a special meeting or you have to wait for a regular meeting. So you can call a special meeting with 24 hours advance notice.
Thank you.
And then two questions followed up on that. Let's say there's a contentious item on the council agenda, right? And all of a sudden, in the middle of a council meeting, we're like, I think we need to get legal advice on this right now. Do we have to wait for the end of the meeting like we've historically done? Or
No.
we could in the middle? Okay.
Yeah.
And then Carol mentioned John calls them executive session. Does it have to be the town manager? Does it have to be a certain person? Is it by a vote? How does that?
Well, so, I mean, think about there are rules about having a meeting. You need to have quorum present to be able to hold a meeting. So that's 4 of you need to be present to hold a meeting. For executive sessions, you need to have a 3/4 vote to go into executive session. And again, this is all tying back to transparency, and the idea that we want most of you to agree to go into executive session.
But to call a special meeting, the charter identifies what the requirements are to call a special meeting. And
And your bylaws,
and the bylaws will.
Yeah. right?
And not even talking about the special meeting, sorry, I didn't mean to pick that up, but the council meeting later, right? If I wanted to call executive session, could I propose that? And if 3/4 of my colleagues voted yes, then we could go into executive session?
Yes.
Okay.
If you ever want to go into executive session, I do recommend that you alert me to that so that I can prepare you with a motion. Because there's case law on what is required for your motion. You have to be specific enough on the reason that you're going into executive session. And that's why you have to cite this statutory provision.
And then what are the other reasons besides legal advice that we could go into executive session?
To instruct negotiators, personnel matters, to talk about items that are subject to the, that are confidential under the Open Records Act. I think another one is security details. Those are the ones that are coming to mind. I think instruct negotiators, but also acquisitions is another one. Okay, so electronic communications, and this is a subset of open meetings law. So electronic communications, the open meetings law has been around for a long time. The electronic communications is something that has been added, and that's because of email. And the General Assembly has added specific provisions related to electronic communications. Electronic communications, email, are meetings and can be meetings that need to be open to the public. So if 3 or more members are discussing public business, it needs to be an open meeting. Well, it can't if three of you are going back and forth on an email chain. I mean, it's just not possible for that to be open to the public. So 3 or more of you should not be having communications back and forth about public business. Any questions on that?
I do have a question. So during a council meeting, there's designated times where public input is accepted and encouraged and all that kind of thing. What is the difference? And playing devil's advocate, I'm just trying to understand it. If all of us are having a conversation on public policy and we just pop the email chain into the record and everyone can view it and then make their public comment on it at the next meeting, because that's kind of what we do, and that's what I'm viewing as what we kind of do during council meetings, right? We talk about things, there's very little public input, and then people can give public input either at the next meeting or at pre-described times during public hearings. So I'm just, what is the difference? And does the law try to account for that?
Well, the legislature hasn't gotten there. The legislature hasn't gotten to a point that where they're comfortable with a chat among council members being able to occur if that chat is then later published. So that sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah.
They're not comfortable with that. And there are, watchdogs in this area. Also, there's press that want to be involved in the meetings, that want to listen on. They're involved in lobbying on these issues. So they're just not there.
If I may weigh in, politically, it's a really bad look. Politically, the message you're sending your voters is We do communicate as a council outside of meetings. We put them in, but people don't necessarily believe that all those communications will be posted. You know, whether they are or not, they may all be posted, but if you give people reason to doubt elected officials, they tend to grapple.
And is that the reason that you've recommended that when someone sends out, say, a summary of a meeting with constituents, and it has a whole list of items that you recommend, do not reply all?
Certainly. So there are, in the open meetings law, there are specific exceptions to these communications, electronic communications. I do want to back up and say that the legislature has said, you all can talk about scheduling. We don't care about scheduling matters. You can talk about scheduling, that's fine. I mean, a note of caution there is that, okay, you're talking about scheduling and then you add on other topics to that. And then potentially we have an open meetings violation because it's not just scheduling. It's not just who can go to coffee with council, it's who can go to coffee with council, and let's make sure we bring up XYZ topic and that, you know, so recommended that you don't have conversations where three or more of you are involved, even if it's intended to just be about scheduling. The legislator does say that there are one-way emails that are okay to send to 3 or more of you, and that is where you're forwarding information, responding to inquiries from citizens, or posing topics for later discussion. And again, it's one-way communication that is acceptable. I will say that, you know, a couple things. One is that your emails are subject to the Open Records Act. So anything you put in an email, unless for other reasons it's confidential, it's subject to the Open Records Act. In addition, as I mentioned, this is an evolving area of the law. We don't have a lot of law on, well, what does it mean to forward information? What is that? What does it mean to pose a topic for later discussion? We don't have a lot of challenges on that. I don't know that we will, but it's just not a topic that's really been fleshed out. Yeah.
Let me push you. Okay, so let's say that I go to a meeting and I gather some information and I send an email out. This is what I learned at this meeting, and don't reply to all. So far, so good?
Yes.
And what if I add, and maybe we could talk about this topic at our next, in an upcoming council meeting. Okay?
Yeah. Yes, I think it's okay.
Okay, let me layer one more on. And the one more could be, one of the recommendations I heard at this meeting was X. Let's discuss that.
Well, I mean, like I said, this is an evolving area. So to me, that all sounds fine. And I would argue and I would defend you if somebody brought an open meetings law case against the town that somehow violated the open meetings statute because it's not within the exceptions of forwarding information or posing a question for later. I would certainly defend you, and we don't have any case opinions as to what that specifically means. And that's what we would need, is we need court opinions to really flesh it out. So it's just a note of caution in terms of being careful about using emails.
Right. Now, let me take Carol's examples one step further. Instead of saying, I recommend we talk about this at an upcoming meeting, this is an issue. I think we ought to do X to solve the issue.
again, you know, somebody gets a hold of that email, maybe they could argue that it doesn't meet the open meetings law. I would argue that it does, that it fits within the exception. It's a one-way communication. One way I would argue this is that, okay, pre-email, why couldn't town council members deliver a letter to each of you? I mean, that's not a violation specifically of the open meetings law, but writing back to somebody is. Again, though, this is an evolving area of the law. And potentially there could be risks with this.
Taking that one step further, if that were allowed, what would happen if council members then responded and said, well, I disagree, or?
Well, then you have a clear violation. You know, you have arguably a clear violation.
Now, how would you suggest Carol,
Why am I the?
well, no, we're
Go
using
ahead,
you
go
as the
ahead,
example,
just
right?
kidding.
Carol goes to this, proposes an action, and I'm like, what the heck is Carol trying to do here?
But I have said, do not reply.
Yeah, and I'm totally against it, right? How do I get that opinion in, like Carol is saying we should develop this policy, and the town staff starts working on a policy to present at a council meeting. And
Well,
I don't think they would do that.
It won't until the council
yeah,
says,
I mean, the best way to bring business forward to each other to talk about it is in other business in your regular meeting. To say that here's something that I think we should work on, that I would like to direct town staff to work on. That way you get buy-in from the other council members that this is an important topic, and you are then directing staff to work on it, to spend administrative time and money, effort to work on it. That's the best way to do it.
I think if I was going to expand on something that John might have been getting at, if you had that email like, I went to a meeting, I learned ABC, and I think we should talk about DEF, and I'm particularly interested in XYZ. Do not reply all. That's reasonable, as you put forward. So if I'm like, oh, no, Z, I don't like Z at all. Could I start a new email and say, hey, council, I've been thinking a lot about recent things I've heard about. I have some concerns about Z. I just wanted to share so that you all knew my mind. Do not reply to this. In regards to Z, I have concerns about blah, blah, blah. I would look forward to discussing these concerns with you in person at our meeting. Would that be valid?
If you are citizen Keystone, how does that look to you?
Negotiation.
that's separate and trying to hide it.
Sure.
I think what I'm hearing you say is that we owe it to the community to share our thoughts in the meeting, not in emails. Is that?
And before you came, Aaron, we were talking about, and this is a little bit different, but we were talking about the idea of serial meetings. And that is where two of you meet to talk about a topic, then two of you meet to talk about a topic, which is allowed. Two of you can meet. You don't have to, it's not open.
Right.
And so, two and two meet to talk about a topic. Then you come into the meeting, the topic comes up, somebody makes a motion, you all vote to approve it. There's no discussion, nothing.
I see what you're saying, but I guess what you might also be saying is instead of like trying to start a new message to everyone as a new email thread in order to have it not be a reply all, but it could that would appear inappropriate with maybe good reason. Maybe it would still be appropriate to discuss my concerns one-on-one with some other people, and then we would have an open discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. You could email that person back, create a separate email and say, I have concerns about X.
That's a great clarification. Thank you.
Again, though, all of your emails are subject to the Open Records Act. So just,
I never send anything I don't assume the world will read.
Right, true that. Here's a question that's really for John. So, say Carol, as the example again, has gone to a meeting, has some interesting material to share. How would you feel about adding that into the notes that come to us beforehand?
Yeah.
Would that be appropriate?
Significantly better than any other way. It's just basically, and my concern is much deeper than our attorneys. Because there's legality and then there's appearance of transparency. And although she loves Keystone and cares about appearance of transparency, sitting here, she's concerned about keeping us all on the correct side of the law. I'm sitting here concerned about keeping you all on the correct side of our voters' understanding of how the council works. So, but especially something like that, if it's materials that you're going to sit and discuss in the meeting, not just say, straight up, this is for the meeting.
Okay.
This is for the meeting.
Okay.
I strongly feel that the public has a right to hear almost all, there's certainly some exceptions, but almost all of the thought processes, discussions, even if you are allowed one-on-one to talk. But think about when you're having that talk, if someone walked up behind you and heard you having that talk, what would their perception be? That's my guidance for it.
Okay.
But on Carol's comment, our meetings would probably be more efficient if we did exactly that for the meetings that we attend, because then that could be in the record.
Yeah.
Everyone has a chance to read it in advance, so you don't have to go through, you only have to, in the meeting, go through those items that that you think are particularly applicable to the council.
Not only that, someone might see in those notes something that they actually want to have a discussion
Okay.
about during the meeting, so we could schedule that discussion time too.
Okay.
I do want to add to this point, and I do agree with John in terms of email communications and public perception. I've been in a lot of meetings where I hear council saying, oh, you know that email that I sent to you? And I didn't get the email, and I'm really curious to know what was in the email. And I'm not a resident. And so that can be very uncomfortable. It can create the perception that you are hiding something.
John, did you have something? Or you just turned it off?
I struggle, and I'm struggling with how to say this PC, right? But there's been times when I feel like I've sent emails to folks and hoped that this conversation would come up in the future, and then they don't come up. And part of me is like, if I had put all council on there or something like that, then other people would be aware of the issue as well. But I guess there's some clarification today about if it's a one-way communication, and then that way more of us are aware of the feedback constituents to be brought up at council meetings. So it's not just John Badger and XYZ person about this.
And if there's an item that you would like to have brought up at a council meeting that hasn't been addressed, again, that's what other businesses can raise it. The council can then make a decision whether they want to add that and have a discussion at a later meeting.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of it, one of the purposes for that.
We good on this? Okay. It's duplicate. So we're going to touch on quasi judicial actions And you all know that you wear many different hats as a town council. There's really three roles that you play: legislative actions, that's passing ordinances. Then you have your administrative, executive actions. That would be more like approving a policy, like your depreciation policies. And actually, if you want to move to the next slide. So legislative is passing the laws. Administrative is building roads. And then quasi-judicial actions is where you're acting as a judge. Town council has had a couple of these. One was a liquor license, and then I believe another one was on a short-term rental issue. You will know before the action comes to you, you'll know for certain in the packet that it is quasi-judicial, so different rules apply. Quasi-judicial means that you're essentially determining rights of specific individuals on a specific, typically an application. You have an application or permit, and you're determining whether that person gets that application or permit. Prior to that point, you've adopted laws, you've taken legislative action to put in place the rules that apply to that permit or that application. Quasi-judicial actions always have notice and a hearing. So notice is given to people that there is going to be a hearing, and then you have your hearing procedures. You need to have a fair and unbiased tribunal, and that's all of you in that quasi-judicial proceeding. Next slide here just talks about that due process must be followed. That's really the notice and hearing and the fair and unbiased tribunal. Same concepts. So the hearing
Can you go
is,
back to the previous slide?
yes,
You say a record-based decision.
correct.
Does that mean that we can have the two-way conversations before the meeting on the subject, or are we required to not have any conversations among ourselves?
You should not have any conversations among yourself on quasi-judicial applications. They are different. So these are, if you have a quasi-judicial issue coming before you, I think you should be getting notice that you have an application that's submitted to the town. So say, for example, you have a land use decision that's going to come to town council. When that application is submitted to the community development director or the planner, you should get an email that that application has been submitted, and then that the ex parte rule applies. So essentially the hearing is the place where all of the evidence is submitted. And the best way to think about this is to think about a court proceeding. The judge or the jury, but if it's a judge trial, the judge is getting all of the evidence in the court proceeding. The judge is not going to be deciding anything based on a conversation that he had at the supermarket. The same is true with all of you. Your decision in a quasi-judicial matter is based on the evidence that's presented to you at the hearing. And the evidence can be in the form of the packet materials that are before you, everything that's been submitted, the application materials, the staff report by the planner, community development director. If there are any letters included in the packet, all of that is evidence. And then also any comments that are provided at that hearing, that's also evidence. Yes.
One thing that I've really struggled with this and the couple that we've done that have been contentious, and I was hoping for your kind of sage wisdom on this, is that personally I can be against something, right? Like I definitely think XYZ land use should not be happening in XYZ area, right? But oftentimes it feels like that we're almost hamstrung on the decision because of it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like with these quasi judicials, we have to remove any of what we use 99% of the time in our meeting, which is opinions, right? Like we think the town should be doing this, we think the town should be doing this. And we have to go to a very rigid set of the law says this, does it meet this, yes or no? And so that's what I find the most difficult about a lot of these is that the two really contentious ones, I was like, I want to vote no to these, but I legally don't think I can. So what's your advice on that?
Well, so one, that's the criteria that you put in place. So that's the initial step, is the criteria that you put in place to judge these decisions. And when you're putting that criteria in place, it's important to think about what you will want to be deciding the decisions. What are the factors that will be important in those decisions? When you put those criteria in place, and this is going to happen when you rewrite your land use code, you're going to be putting criteria for decisions in the land use code. And you will be guided and given advice as to what to put in that criteria. But for these decisions, yes, you are bound by the criteria. You are not supposed to be biased. And so your decision is based on the facts and the criteria. It's the application of the facts to the criteria.
And so currently, right, the only way, and I'm digressing a little bit, the only way that we could possibly address this is not through no voting on these, is through declaring an emergency and suspending like all land use decisions or something. Right?
If there's something that is coming to the town that's a big issue and you don't feel like you're adequately prepared for it, that does happen. That is, you can put in a moratorium because you don't feel like your rules really apply to this particular situation.
Because currently, and I'll just use a random example, right? If we have approved a variance in the community, right? Or sorry, we disapproved a variance in the community, that person could then go to court, sue us and just get it overturned if it met all the criteria.
Yeah. And we're getting off the slides, but I think that discussion is important. I was talking with, beforehand, there was a case decision that came out recently. Castle Pines was sued because they denied a site plan for a McDonald's to be built in Castle Pines. And this is funny from a lawyer's perspective, but they had the hearing, a whole bunch of people came to the hearing, about 100 residents. They were very against this. I don't know if they created banners or whatever, but the slogan was "No clown in our town." And so town council denied the application. And they denied the application based on two criteria that were in the code. And the criteria were that the site improvement plan, it needed to meet all of the criteria. And one of the criteria was the site improvement plan supports the goals and objectives of the City of Castle Pines comprehensive plan. And they denied it based on that. They also denied it based on the fact that they said that the site improvement plan did not further the public health, safety, and welfare of the community. Denied it based on that. And the court upheld it. The court said there was evidence in the record that it did not meet that criteria, that courts don't want to also undo council's decisions. They want to defer to council's decisions. And so if there's some evidence in the record that supports their findings, they will uphold it.
But those two very up for interpretation, if I might say that, sections allowed the council to say that versus I would argue that the couple of decisions we had, there was not the loose for interpretation.
And so that's the criteria that you put in place.
Okay.
When we have again, we've been notified of a quasi judicial matter coming before us. Is it all right for us to go do research on that matter outside in internet searches and
drive-bys.
Let's go. So Maddie, can you go to?
is it, you're covering it somewhere else?
I am.
You can, why don't we, we'll just.
Okay. Some of this, go back to where we were. Where are you at? So the hearing is, and you all know this already, but it is at an open meeting. You lay out what the process of the hearing is going to be. The mayor does a really good job of this, going through the script. Staff presents the application. You only ask questions of the staff, no opinion statements. And again, this is, you don't want to have, you're not prejudging the application. So right now you're just gathering information while the staff presents the application. And then the applicant has an opportunity to present. Again, only asking questions and not suggesting this is how I'm gonna vote on the matter.
Is there any opportunity to ask questions of a community member who's giving public comments that are unclear?
That would be your mayor's decision as to whether.
He does have that option.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The note of caution on this is treating everybody fairly and similarly, and, you know, who do you ask clarifying questions to, who do you don't? Also, do you answer questions in the hearing? No, really, you're not going to be answering questions. It is probably a good idea if you have public comment to allow the applicant to speak to that public comment, so that the applicant can answer questions that the public has raised. So you have public comment, and then, as I mentioned, the applicant can rebut.
If you believe that there's information that is not currently in the record, are you allowed to ask questions that would cause that information to be put in the record?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's your role, is to ask questions. And you should not be testifying. There's a difference between asking questions and testifying and putting information into the record.
May seem radical, but it seems like this whole process supports the applicant more than the community. The community member is allowed 3 minutes, no opportunity for give and take, but the applicant can rebut with the applicants may say, oh, Mrs. Jones there misunderstood everything. Here's the answer. And if Mrs. Jones knows that, no, you have now misrepresented it, she doesn't seem to have as much leeway to influence the council as the applicant.
Well, one, they can submit written comment before the meeting. They can submit written comment and it can be in the packet. As many people can speak on the 3 minutes. Typically, I really haven't heard people speak on a topic beyond 3 minutes in a really informed and organized and intelligent way. Typically, 3 minutes is sufficient.
I'm not referring to the amount of time. I'm referring to the fact that there's no
Rebuttal.
rebuttal opportunity for community members.
You know, you got to put some rules in place. Otherwise, some of these hearings could go on for a very long time. We're also talking about the applicant typically has some type of property interest or some interest in moving forward with either property or like a liquor license. So the applicant is very invested in the decision.
As are the neighbors.
Exactly. And this Castle Pines case is a great example of people coming out opposed to an applicant. And the city council went with the residents, decided with the residents, the big developer sued and lost. So it doesn't always work out. And it should work out so that the case is being decided on the facts, the petition or the permit is being decided on the facts and not necessarily who has how many more minutes or time.
Okay, sorry, one more. I talked about Mrs. Jones. Maybe she was emotional. She didn't get her point across really quickly. Her 3 minutes was over. The applicant gets up and says she misunderstood everything. When it comes to the council deliberation, we have no opportunity to ask follow-on questions of the community members, do we?
Again, that's a question for your chair of the meeting, for the mayor, if you want to ask.
So if I had a question, I could propose it to the mayor and ask, would you be willing to entertain this?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then we would afford that same opportunity for everyone else who spoke,
Well,
if we had a question.
yeah, not necessarily, but you want to decide things and you want to get full information.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
if a community member wants to be effective in their communications to us, and I don't think many understand this,
Yes.
they need to look at the criteria
Right.
and they need to speak about how this violates the criteria, specific criteria, versus be emotional or I don't like this.
Exactly. Yeah, those arguments are not, we don't want this here. It's not a very good argument against denying something.
I do have a follow-up question. You speak of the facts of the case, right? And I do understand that there is some facts that are irrefutable, right? The town staff will put together a report that probably this property at XYZ location with XYZ parameters or whatever, like the numbers are, right? The facts. What I struggle with is facts that are presented to us by either the applicant or Mrs. Jones or whoever is speaking that, like, we're not allowed to fact check. How is there a mechanism for us to fact check that? Is there a mechanism that, if Mrs. Jones claims that the earth is flat, can I ask the town manager, like, Mr. Manager, do you think that the earth is flat based on the assessment that town staff has? Like, how is there a way to get the true facts? Because we're not putting them under oath, right? Like, I know we've talked a lot about the court of law, but we're not putting them under oath here. So perjury, I presume, is not a thing.
Some councils do swearing in of people who provide testimony and comments. It's not typical, but I have seen people do that. You can ask questions of staff after you have public comment. So you can ask staff that can be your fact checking.
Like, Mr. Manager, Mrs. Jones, or a community member said this. Is there any indication that this would be
Yeah.
a factual
You
statement?
respond to that comment.
As is stated.
As someone who stood before this council on a quasi judicial matter,
Yeah.
may I just offer a few thoughts and applaud a few comments that have recently come up. my personal takeaway was I did feel it was a little slanted towards the applicant. In hindsight, I did submit something, but I think I wish I would have submitted like a 50-page report of details and information that wasn't able to come up. I think my 3-minute would have been more appropriate for questions asked of the council of me, because had I submitted something already, I really don't need to recap something in 3 minutes on a report. And I think there was some frustration walking away from the process that some information wasn't presented due to my fault. Some questions weren't asked. Some things weren't corrected or had the opportunity to correct by the applicant. Like I say, I think it's a tricky process. You have two parties standing in front of the council presenting. Someone wants something, someone doesn't want something to happen. But it was a very eye-opening and learning experience that I did go through.
Building on that, and thank you, Steve, for sharing that. Are we allowed, or is the town staff allowed, not to coach, but to coach somebody who's a concerned citizen, Ms. Jones comes up, and can the town staff say, these are the 5 criterias that this is going to be judged on? If you have a comment on this, I'd recommend that these are the 5 criterias that it's going to be judged on, make a comment related to that. Like, are we allowed to say that?
The staff?
Or the council?
Oh, yeah, I mean, yes, the mayor should say that and has said that in.
No, ahead of time, right? Because a lot of, and I mean, there's no disrespect, but it's very fast. A lot of times, Mrs. Jones wouldn't be able to compile her thoughts in an appropriate way. She might be nervous. But is there a way that Mrs. Jones ahead of time says that she doesn't like this proposal? Can we say these are the 5 criteria it's going to be judged on? Please present something related to this for most effective communication.
Staff report before the public hearing.
Okay.
We always list the criteria. And I would hesitate to, if someone starts to get off the criteria, I would still hesitate to interrupt them, because they're allowed to say what they want to say. It just might not be the most effective thing they're doing, but I don't think you have to be real careful if you say stick to the criteria and all of a sudden they forget to say something that could have swayed the decision.
So if Mrs. Jones comes to me opposed to something, can I steer her towards the packet, or do I have to be no communication about it?
You can say, look at the packet. What you can't do is you can't take in information.
Yeah. Mrs. Jones, thank you for sharing this. Look at the packet. That's the criteria it's judged on.
Thank you for sharing. I can't discuss this.
You can't have a discussion with Mrs. Jones.
So how do I
Thank you
steer
for your
Mrs.
interest. If you want to do anything more, go to the packet.
Right.
Yeah, the information about the application is in the packet. And
So if I could add, way before you hear an application in a quasi judicial setting, I sit down, or my staff sits down with the applicant and is very, very clear on what they need to submit and what the criteria is. If they start straying, we advise them on what to submit to support their proposal.
And if anyone opposed to that proposal came in during the week and asked us about it, you guys can't, but the general public can, we would give them the same sort of advice. This is what the decision is going to be made on. These are the important things for you to consider.
So it would be, if you are approached, direct them to staff if they have questions. And I will do my very best to give them the information that you will get and that they are asking for. You keep the decisions factual in nature.
so I have quite a few slides, but I think we can run through because we've talked about a lot of this stuff. So here's the evidence that you will be basing your decision on: staff report, presentation, materials, and then your public comments. So after the hearing, you close a public hearing, and that's when you can have your deliberation. You can say, I think we should deny it, and this is why we should deny it. And again, the important part here is to tie what you heard, your evidence, to the criteria when you have your.
And the script that you provided me recommends going through it criteria by criteria with an opportunity to say, does this or does this not meet the criteria?
Yes,
And we can have a split vote on that.
right, you can. Yeah. So again, based on the criteria, the deliberations matter. Again, this goes back actually to the open meetings discussion, having the conversation about why you want to approve an application, or why you think the application should be denied is important for transparency. And to have a good record as to why the decision was made. I think most of this is talked about this. Okay, we'll get to the ex parte rule. So this is, we've talked about this a little bit. This is when the application is filed, this really triggers the ex parte rule. And what this means is that you should not be having any contact with anybody outside of the public hearing about the application. And the idea is that you're deciding the application based on the evidence that's presented in the public meeting that the public has access to and that the applicant has access to. It's not fair that you're hearing information and that information could persuade you and the applicant doesn't have the same information. So no contacts outside the public hearing. Any written materials should be sent to staff to include in the packets. Do not conduct any outside research related to the topic. Site visits in small towns, it's hard not to know what the site looks like. It's hard not to have that information. What the mayor said about asking questions to solicit that information in the public hearing, that's where you get that information into the public record. So if you know a site and you know information that is facts that are important, then ask questions about it and make sure you solicit the answer through somebody. If you're not able to do that, and you have a fact, you have knowledge of something that you think is important, then say that in the first part of the hearing. So you can say, I understand that the building is situated at this part of the lot. And that's something that I understand. And you can ask the applicant, is that true? So that the applicant has an opportunity to weigh in on that. Does that make sense? That's another way to clean up if you did happen to have an ex parte conversation. So somebody just spilled something to you, you didn't have a chance to tell them to stop. You can say, I had this conversation with X person, or they told me this. And that way you get it out in the open and the applicant has an opportunity to know that information as well. But again, the best practice is not to speak with anybody about it.
Jennifer, if I
Yes.
may ask a quick question of the staff. So because we heard about the 50-page report that should be submitted, what is staff's obligation to include documentation? So what if we get a manifesto that has absolutely nothing to do with?
Then you talk to me about it and we can work through it. I mean, it's hard to not include stuff. Maybe there would have to be a special a special room set up where people can go see information and it's not posted, but something that's clearly not relevant, we might be able to exclude it.
I think I found Lindsay very helpful and very encouraging to submit
Take a bow.
documents when that event happened. I think 50-page would be extreme, but I think it would have been a little bit longer and a little bit more detailed
Yes.
and a little more relevant had I gone back in time. So like I say, it was a very valuable learning experience, and I think it's a learning experience for not only the council, but all parties involved.
As someone who's gone through this process with the county a couple of times, the first 2 times I went through it, I didn't have a clue, and the comments were very more emotional. Community opposes this, and had no idea of the importance of the criteria. I've since learned the importance of the criteria. So as we were coordinating community comment on it, we also made sure the community comment addressed those criteria as well, and as well as the overall input that the organization had on the event. So it was very tailored at the end to focus strictly on the events, and we were successful then. We were unsuccessful in earlier attempts on impacting some of the county's decisions, because communities absolutely opposed. We have 83% who oppose this application. It ought to be disapproved, but there's no why. So the fact that 83% of the feedback, or 1,000 people, said they don't want it, actually is nice information, but it doesn't apply to making that decision. The criteria.
That's a very good point. I'd like to speak just very briefly on, say there's new information submitted at the meeting, at the public hearing. And you're not obligated to render a decision at that meeting. If you believe, if there's a motion to continue the item, to afford staff and council to consider that new information, you're absolutely entitled to do that. So just a little bit more.
No, that's a great point. You can do that. And for these ex parte communications, you can blame me. You can say, I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say, but the town attorney has told me I can't talk to you about this. And you need to either come to the public hearing or you need to submit written comments that can be included in the packet.
Can they submit those written comments to my email and I forward it off to the town staff, or how?
It's just better to do it to the community development director, to the planner.
Okay.
That's better.
But am I correct that and I've run into this in prior lives as well, that if a community member, even though you say you need to submit the comments to town staff, instead they send it to John, can John then forward that on to the town staff, say, I received this comment, I'm not making any judgment on it, but here's something to potentially be included in the packet?
Yes, that's fine.
That would never happen.
Okay, so there are times, like I've said, where you do have some ex parte conversations. It happens. It's not necessarily fatal to the decision. What should be done if you have some conversations either with a citizen, with the applicant in that window, and the window is when the application was filed and before your hearing, contact the community development director, contact me, and then we can work on getting that information put in the packet. You disclose at the start of the hearing, hey, I had a conversation with the applicant. This is what was discussed. And as long as everything is put into the record and there is all of that information is put into the record, then that can prevent any issue of, compromise to the decision. I think that is it.
Any other questions for our attorney? Any other questions overall for what the whole discussion was about?
I would just like to make a comment that I think the point about several people shared their direct experiences with not necessarily knowing how these quasi-judicial hearings happen. I think that that's something to definitely be aware of, and I'm almost concerned, right? Because we have the potential for professional developers and professional large companies that have professional staff members who it's their job to do these hearings all the time, right? And so I do think that it can be very easy for the applicant to have an upper hand here, and that citizens can feel that their voices are not heard. And so I like, maybe it's we don't make a decision right during that time, right? And I just think as a body, we should be aware that that is something that's definitely felt by people that have done that on this body, and that by people in the community that might then be frustrated, feeling like their voices weren't heard or we made the wrong decisions, when in reality, they didn't just go through an hour-long training about the quasi-judicial hearing. They don't understand the process necessarily. And so that's just, as a comment, I want to keep that front of mind for us.
It's probably important that we as council members take the opportunity as of concerns come up to make sure that the community understands the limitations that we have, but also the importance of them to address that criteria to get those facts in the record.
You can ask that question directly. Which of these criteria does this consider?
We can't, because we can't have an ex parte with.
No, when they're giving their testimony.
Oh, yeah.
Can take steps like that to make sure, well, not make sure, but to do your best to ensure that the community has an informed voice. You can use your questions.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of criteria, the criteria we're dealing with now came to us when we adopted the county land code. We have said many times that when we get the comprehensive plan, we'll be addressing that code. I think there are two things that came out of this discussion. One is the opportunity to create, the right word, establish a moratorium until we do address criteria. The second thing that came up is when and how shall we address that criteria? Can you address the latter? So I already see your body language on the former.
Yeah. First of all, and I think our attorney will back me up, a lot of this criteria is just basically fundamental and has been upheld by courts before. And that's what we've adopted. You have to be careful trying to impose new criteria that hasn't been tested, because then you're just kind of asking for a court case one way or the other. And I feel actually that the criteria in the county code, the biggest problem I think is not with the criteria, but with the comprehensive plan that we've adopted, which is one of the criteria in almost all land use decisions. Does this comply with the comprehensive code? And,
can you explain that distinction? Because it seemed to have come out of this conversation that the critical thing was the criteria.
well, one of the
Help us
criteria,
understand.
as we said in the Castle Pines case, was, does this comply with the comprehensive plan?
But we don't, like, when we've used that before.
Our comprehensive plan isn't necessarily designed, it's not designed for the town of Keystone.
So we're referencing the comprehensive plan that doesn't apply to us,
Yes.
which is like
Which we all
an
agree
issue.
to,
Yeah.
right? So I think maybe what I'm asking for, and this is a lot to ask, but if you could give us a generic question, because we've been told and we have said to our constituents, oh, when the comprehensive plan is done, when that is done, and then we will have to look at it and we'll have discussions about whether we want to actually adopt it. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. Give us your best estimate based on what Lindsay's hearing from the SE group, when we will be facing that discussion.
We hope to finish up the comp plan in late fall. And at that point, it'll go for adoption.
We're talking November,
Right.
December.
There are too many variables right now. That's the best I can do. At the end of November, I hope to get, if not before, get you a draft copy of your comp plan.
And if
That's
there's
the
any
plan.
adjustments to it where we feel that they're not adequately taking into account XYZ measure, then that would be more iterations of it that would push back the full adoption.
That is correct. Now, with that being said, and I mean this with the utmost respect, the plan is going to be based on what is being heard from your constituents.
If you have flawed questions, you get flawed answers. That's all I'll say.
Understood.
I'm not sure that's the point I would make. I'm not disagreeing, but in the end, this is a group of experts we have hired to help our decision-making, and it will be up to us to adopt any or all,
Yes.
or to modify. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm just.
I know you're thinking, oh my
Staff is
God.
not coming up with just arbitrary and capricious goals and policies by any means. It's based on the input and public outreach that we're getting from the public.
And as, to go back to your first point, I'm generally a pro-growth, property rights kind of guy. But if you as the board feel or as the council feel it's important to impose a moratorium, that's your unadvised from your town manager's option to do so.
Can you dig into that a little bit? Because I think to Carol's initial question was getting some more information on it. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but getting some more information. To be honest with you, that was on my notes for other council matters. So if we want to put a pin in this and talk about it later, then sure. But I do have that question on what would that look like? What would the true impact be? Is there a way that we can target specific areas of the moratorium, right? Just not a moratorium on all land use matters, but a moratorium on new builds or things like that. Is there a way that we could target specific aspects?
Yeah, yes, you can. You have to be careful because you can't can you target that parcel?
Oh,
Not personal.
no, I mean, I don't think, yeah, you wouldn't want to do that. You wouldn't want to target a specific property owner.
But how would that, so for example, I'm just thinking Dan's community, right? If there's an undeveloped lot in that community, right? Not that the houses all look the same, but there's a very clear understanding of what most of the houses in that neighborhood would look like, right? So I would be hesitant to try to put a moratorium on that community versus say a drastic change in a different neighborhood where somebody's trying to build a McMansion where there's A-frames. How do you target effectively? Is that possible to target?
I think you also need to develop your reasons as to why you're putting a moratorium in place. What are you trying? A moratorium is to allow you to study and to think about an issue more. And so what are you studying? What are you investigating to put the moratorium in place?
Clearly, this is not the place where we're going to make those decisions or make those recommendations, but I think what we've just heard is there are some concerns about the current code and interest in what the recommendations would be. That's what we need to study, the delta there, and yet we cannot actually do that until late fall. Is that reasonable? Let's hear that.
Lindsay?
So, all valid points. But I honestly, I know you don't like the existing comp plan. I know that you don't like the Snake River Master Plan. With that being said, just like the town manager said, the majority of your quasi judicial decisions have criteria. One of the criteria is general compliance with the applicable master plan. There's enough flexibility in that document. There is. If you don't like it, and if it's not arbitrary in nature, I bet you that staff can find a way to deny or at least go that direction if appropriate.
I did not feel that way on the last two quasi judicials we had.
That's what I wanted to say. I felt like we were very, like in a cattle chute. However,
The liquor licensing one is completely different.
we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
When, what I don't remember, is there one about neighborhood character? Is that one of the criteria?
Again,
Okay.
neighborhood character is no. There is a sentence or two in one of those master plans that certainly speaks to that issue. Depending on the type of application, there is criteria. Is it compatible in nature? There is.
Did we
But,
discuss
but
that?
the two that are coming to mind is the variance in Loveland Pass Village and the situation in
The STR.
Steve's neighborhood. And those had two different criteria sets.
So you're absolutely correct. Now, remember, variances are a little different. Those are more black and white decisions. And by the way, master plan consideration is not part of that criteria. It's not. Now, the CUP, yes, it was. And if you recall, this was, my recollection is it was not a unanimous vote by any means. As such, you voted, I believe it was a 4-3 vote. At any rate, there was a compelling argument. And Steve, I do appreciate what you said. And hypothetically, if I'd been a neighbor, I would have gone to one of those criteria. Consistent with public health, safety, welfare, I would have gone, well, did the applicant submit a traffic report? And how many left-hand turning movement? I would have factually addressed those issues. There was nothing in the record that lend itself to that. And quite frankly, a previous decision from a historic perspective supported the notion that maybe it didn't rise to that threshold. I don't know. So I honestly do believe that a majority, it absolutely will be tweaked once the master plan, comp plan is adopted. But I think the nuts and bolts, quite frankly, are very likely there in the criteria for the various different applications.
If we get to a point where we have a quasi judicial hearing and we have not put a moratorium in or we've not made any adjustments and we're operating in the status quo, we've been told that we can delay the decision until more information is heard. If we delay the decision far enough and all of a sudden we do have a new comp plan, do they get judged by the old comp plan or the new comp plan?
The attorney address.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably the old comp plan because that's
when
what
the
the
application came in.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing I do want to caution you in is that there are some limitations with regards to how long you can continue an item. You got to afford the applicant due process in a fair manner.
Understood.
Carol?
Lost my train of thought. Dan, were you going to ask something?
No.
Buy me a minute here. On the moratorium area. Oh, I'm not aware of anything pending. And let's assume there's nothing pending. Shoot, where was I going to go with this? Is it not better that we make a move like this when there isn't something already on the docket?
So it doesn't seem like we're targeting.
Correct. Just generally speaking.
Like the, move towards the moratorium.
Yeah.
There's a lot pending. Not necessarily all of it will be brought forth through quasi judicial hearings.
Those are the only ones we're talking about, I think. I'm not speaking for me.
Why are you just talking about the quasi judicial hearings? I mean, there could be development that doesn't need approval through the quasi judicial.
It should still be reviewed.
Give us an example. I'm
Yeah,
trying, I'm
educate
on
us.
an
That's
example
what we're
first.
asking.
Hypothetically, a building permit for a single family.
Would not typically reach the necessity of coming to us, but would be impacted potentially by a moratorium.
If you went that far, absolutely. But with that being said, I think I would feel more comfortable. Well, number one, I need to know the scope of the issues that you're worried about. You gave a good example of architectural character. I would need, this warrants a lot more decision with regards to this issue. I would be very apprehensive to say the moratorium on everything.
So there's classes for these applications, right? Like class 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
That is,
Would a single family home fall under a class 3 or 4? And what I'm trying to get at this point is if we were to explore a moratorium and we were to tie it to certain classes, right? Like class 3 and 4 applicants would fall under a moratorium. Like, is that something we could do without impacting a single family home?
yes.
Would that serve your purpose? Because I mean, the example that was brought up is McMansion and Loveland Pass Village, which can happen without coming in front of you,
How so?
as long as they build to the allowable requirements.
But that's not happening.
But the problem with Loveland Pass Village, you say we have specific criteria and a variance is kind of black and white, but then we were faced with the fact that every inch of Loveland Pass Village is itself a variance. So I think that made it challenging. I don't want to relitigate anything we've already done, but I'm wary of the next one that comes down the pike.
I think that Carol said it best earlier. We're not going to boil the ocean right now with everyone kind of having opinions, but like, I guess I'd ask the council and mayor if we could ask our staff and attorney to explore moratorium options.
Yes.
We need more guidance. We need to know what you are looking to stop.
For me personally, impacting the character of neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's specifically it.
Any new construction impacts the character
It could be.
of the neighborhood in some way or another, so.
And I think that this is a great example of, well, I know it's legal, so you can't say use discretion, right? But there are certain aspects that impact the character of a neighborhood, right? And just an example, right? A short-term rental in a neighborhood that is only single-family homes that live there or second homeowners but don't rent, like that would be for me, that would be a significant differentiation from the intent of the community or the neighborhood.
Understand that's a huge flip from this council's position on short-term rentals when we were adopting it, which was we're the pro short-term rental community. That's a message I've received from you.
That may have been a bad example, but I'm trying to show like the serious divergence from the intention of the neighborhood is what I was trying to get at.
I want to ask this question. If somebody has proposed a new build, at what point or who makes a decision about the character, whether it fits the character of the neighborhood?
So give me just a little bit of context. For a single family going up in an established subdivision,
Sure.
it's already been done. That
That's
decision's
the
already been
PUD?
rendered that a single family is appropriate in a single family lot in the Alders. Done.
Oh, but character of the neighborhood is more than whether it's a single
But you have-
family.
But so I'm just talking use. So the use would be single family.
Yeah.
Now, say they came in with a duplex, 2 units, they could not do that. They wouldn't even get in front of you.
Well, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Breckenridge is looking at this character of the neighborhood based on the size of new buildings or rebuilds. I think it's appropriate for us to be aware of that. Let's say there is established neighborhood, they plan to scrape an existing anywhere in Keystone area. They're gonna scrape the existing building and build something that is 3 times as big as anything else in the neighborhood. I'm trying to be out there to just help you see my point.
If the zoning is in place, so what governs what is allowed, does not address square footage, but it only addresses height,
Right.
setbacks, impervious area, things like technical things, and they meet that, you are correct. I wouldn't be able to stop that.
And that's what they refer to when they like to use the word by right, right?
Use by right,
Okay.
yes.
Get that right.
But with that being said, if they proposed a commercial use, they couldn't do that.
Right.
But I think in these 2 examples, where you're going is you happen to have picked something that's pretty hard to codify, which is taste. I can almost guarantee you that all 7 of you would not agree on an architectural style. Not saying that can't be done, but that's tough. It can be very arbitrary in nature. So that topic is tough.
I know our dinner's waiting. I know that no one
Okay.
planned this discussion. Can we ask that this be on a future work session for more discussion? Is that?
Yes,
would that be what
it
you
would
want
help
to see?
if you,
Yes, well,
staff members.
We didn't plan this. I didn't plan this.
If
Let's
you
get back to
emailed
you.
us more what you're thinking of.
Okay.
Give us more details on, be specific, because a moratorium has to be specific.
Can I push this? I understand what you're saying, but can I push this back on the attorney and manager to give us some examples of what we could be specific on? Could you send us a list that it's square footage, that it's allowable parking space? Like, what could we actually put a moratorium on? Because it's hard for me to say I want to put a moratorium on something I don't know, right? And sorry, Valerie.
Would it be in relation to our pending affordable housing plan and rezoning in relation to that?
That's tough, because it would be hard to limit that to any single neighborhood. When you're talking affordable housing, because we want to encourage that everywhere. Look, if you want to stop building in Loveland Pass Village, send me an email saying we want to stop building in Loveland Pass Village. If you want to stop building out on Soda Ridge Road, send me an email. We don't want any more multifamilies on Soda Ridge Road until we're sure we can address this situation. But we can ban new building or stop for a limited period of time all new construction. Please, God, don't do that. But that's what it's allowed up to. So.
And then we can, so what I'm trying to get at, right, is getting at what we can provide you, which is we could ban by a PUD area, we could ban by a neighborhood area, we could ban by a street, we could ban by a size of the house, we could ban by a makeup of the house, duplexes versus single family, we could ban by intention of spaces. Yes, but I'm trying to understand what we could use as criteria, which all of those things seemed like they would be possible. Okay.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you don't want to be treating people differently. So property owners in one area, you have a moratorium on, property owners you don't. Why? And I think that that's what the manager is saying. There's got to be some reason why you're treating some property owners different from others. There have been claims that moratoriums are considered to be a regulatory taking because you're prohibiting that property owner from developing the property. Those have not been successful. You have reasons in place and you have time-limited moratoriums.
Last moratorium I was aware of was how Sulphur Springs and multifamily, or put a moratorium on multifamily buildings for a while. And the argument was they're trying to preserve the single-family nature and they want to regulate multifamily so that it did not impinge on the single-family nature. But
And how did that play out?
no one built on Sulphur Springs anyways.
Are you saying it was irrelevant?
For a large part, yes. There were not any plans and still are no plans for, since the moratorium's been lifted, for multifamily dwellings.
So I again don't want to be steamrolling this conversation, but could we possibly see if there's interest in having this on a work session moving forward?
Yeah, if the council desires to have it on the work session, we can take a straw vote. The answer is yes, we can do it. I think the manager made a good point. We need to be pretty specific about what you are looking for in a moratorium. I would be very concerned about a broad moratorium, but specifically at what you're looking for. And we're probably looking for probably 4 months, 5 months at most, given the timelines that we're walking through with the comp plan and getting that comp plan, not only here the draft, but also getting that draft through the planning commission, which is required to approve it before it comes to us.
And throwing it back on staff, you can email us.
Yeah.
And this is what I want to see done.
Right.
And then we can figure out if there's a possible route to get that done. You don't have to say, I want to ban all houses in X, Y, and Z PUDs above 8,000 square feet. You don't have to say that, but I'm concerned about overly large houses in these neighborhoods and leaking, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I'll ask the question as a community development director has ear to the ground and gets a lot of informal conversations. Is there anything that you see even on the horizon in the next year?
Next year?
Yeah.
I believe there'll be a multifamily building that's already has its entitlements with regards to zoning, likely coming in. Nothing of large scale that I'm aware of.
How many units?
12, 14-ish. It's the only one that I'm absolutely know that is very likely to come in. Never know. Never know.
Anything at all coming in Loveland Pass?
Not that I'm aware of.
Would a defensible and reasonable aspect of a moratorium be to have a moratorium on new buildings if there's an existing building that's significantly different than the proposed new building? So let's say I have a tent that's on my lot now and I want to build a 12-unit apartment or multifamily house there. Would that be something we could call out in a moratorium as being not allowed for 5 to 6 months until we get the comp plan?
I think temp's probably a bad example. You have an older house.
Yes.
That they're proposing to tear down and build a new home. It's great.
Yep.
Is
that an example of something we could do?
Ken, those are tough to Those are tough to defend to an extent. You can do it, but it would have to apply to everyone equally. There's, we're a resort town. We're a town, but we're still a resort town. And people have investment expectations for the property.
It also would need to be drafted in such a way so that the staff could easily apply it. I mean, you don't want the staff getting in to having to figure out, oh, does this application fit within the moratorium or does it not? It has to be really cut and dry.
Could there be a request, put a moratorium, broad moratorium said, in this neighborhood, if in Loveland Pass Village, we want to put a moratorium on new builds and scrapes without impacting.
I personally would be a little apprehensive just because we're calling out one subdivision. I mean, it's certainly.
We're calling out one zoning area too. I throw that at our attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that what the manager has said in terms of sending emails to him and let's think about this and bring it back and talk about it. But really the concerns that you are wanting to address and what you're wanting to study is the important piece. What are you afraid about?
What don't you want to see?
I'm not sure what we're trying to address. I'm not sure what the issue is right now. I mean, I've heard all this and I understand, I'll go on the record by saying my knee-jerk reaction on moratorium is no, that's bad. Is there some issue that we're really trying to address that we know about that we can fine tune specific, I'm open to, I mean, all ears, but I haven't seen it yet.
I think for me to get at that, we don't know what the issue is, but we've had two very flagrant issues come forward on the council that have caused dissatisfaction with the community members in that and I don't want to put words in specific people's mouths, but their opinion is that we're not acting fast enough to get the code changed for our zoning, right? And they feel like that, as a town, we're not doing anything, right? They don't understand that we are doing a lot, but we can't just wave a magic wand and all of a sudden the zoning is exactly how everyone wants it here. And I guess the concern is the unknown, right? What happens if Mrs. Jones comes forward and tries to do a crazy.
I just, on the political side too, there's a significant number of people in the community who, given what is already built there, obviously have no problem with the decision that this council has made. And people who don't have a problem with councils, never ever tell them that.
Fair enough.
I think the critical thing position that I'm coming from is that we don't know. We've heard the word moratorium in the past. Again, I had the same knee-jerk, oh my God, we don't want the nuclear option. However, with time and more experience, I think I have come to is a recognition that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what our options that necessarily are, and what would be at stake in the next 4 months. And I may decide that moratorium is not a correct option, but I'd like a serious discussion. Sorry, did I speak over somebody?
Why?
No, there's like hundreds of flies in this room and they're biting my legs.
Oh, it was, okay, I thought I was making up those bites.
Their bites aren't pleasant.
No.
I think to try to move this along, the manager's given us an option.
Yep.
Say what you would like to accomplish in it, and that will then give them an opportunity, and we can, let me just ask the question. Do members of the council desire to have a discussion on this at a future work session that's narrowed down based on input the council members have given the staff? How many would be in favor of that? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have a majority. So the answer is yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. And as we go forward, but yeah, please get your inputs into staff of what you would like to see and your objectives. Because I think that's something we're going to have to.
It'll be helpful.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
we may come to no conclusion.
So this is a test based on the last hour and a half. Were you gonna email? Me. Gonna email each other?
Oh.
No.
Emailing John, but okay.
Right. It's now 6:25. We had the natural medicine discussion. Is there any issues with delaying that for another council meeting? I know that due date for it is early next year.
February, right?
In that case, any objection to adjourning the work session and having dinner and then reconvening for the council session 7 o'clock?
Objection.